Welcome to the Quest for Quality podcast with keynote speaker Joe Higgins.
In terms of Quest for Quality, this is really about living a quality life, having a quality career. If you always aim for quality in your life, you will almost always find success at some point in the longer term.
For decades, Joe has shared his Quest for Quality message with thousands of business professionals across the country.
Some of you may know our keynote speaker. I would tell you he's a legend in the industry, and it's great to see him back with us.
I've had the privilege and honor introducing some very famous speakers to you. They were all great speakers and showed you how a winning attitude brings success. But our next speaker is even better. Joe Higgins has walked in our shoes. Joe's the only speaker in our history that we've invited to talk to us 2 years in a row.
The Quest for Quality podcast presents a universal message under the umbrella of 4 areas of Joe's unprecedented experience and expertise. Leadership, building healthy teams, customer service, understanding the American economy.
I'm trying to let people get that message that it's taken me 40 years to learn. I've had a lot of experience. I've gone through major levels of an organization, have trained and worked with and supervised thousands of people over my career and created leaders at the Whirlpool Corporation today that are running the company. So hopefully what I bring here in this thing is allowing people to live a better life and a better quality of life.
Well, thank you again for joining us for yet another edition of the Quest for Quality with Joe podcast. I'm Tim, and once again, we're visiting with Joe Higgins, the founder of Quest for Quality. And over the last several episodes and weeks, we've talked about Joe's success in his career with the Whirlpool organization. We talked about the economy and the direction the American economy is headed over the next 10 years. We've talked about leadership and building high-performance teams and great customer service. All of those are very important topics, but one of the most important topics that you covered, Joe, while you're out speaking is about building healthy teams. And the reason why it's one of the more important topics is because we said it in the last podcast on building healthy teams. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. If you don't have your health, you can't be a great leader. You can't have great consumer confidence. You can't build healthy teams. You can't provide great customer service. It all comes down to health. For those that might not have had the opportunity yet to listen to the Building Healthy Teams podcast, let's just take a snapshot of where you are in your life right now, because we need to build credibility. We need these people to know that you're not a doctor, but you're 66 years old and you're very healthy. Give us a quick snapshot. You're not being braggy right here, but I do want people to know it still startles me when you tell me what you do at your age. Not calling you old or anything. Don't think I am.
All right. Well, I'm not a doctor, but I have spent the last 40 or almost 50 years probably in reading about and engaged with health. I can remember as a 14-year-old boy reading an article and giving up full-fat milk and drinking non-fat milk. You can imagine at 14 what a shift that was. And I gave up bacon around 16 years old. I gave up meat when I was about 21. And I've spent all those years in research and reading just about everything I could get my hands on to make sure I was going to be a healthy person. I wanted to look ahead and say I wanted to live a long, healthy life, and healthy being the main part of that. So you asked about results and where I'm at. Well, I am 66. I've been a vegan. I have not had any meat probably for the last 40 years of my life. Very restrictive diet in terms of taking out all the stuff that most Americans eat. But at 66 years old, I still run every morning. I play basketball in the afternoon. I go to the gym, do weights, and I play racquetball as well in the evening sometimes. I also at my age, I've never taken a prescription drug. My wife has known me now for 15 years, and she's never seen me sick. I never get the flu. At Whirlpool, I don't think I ever had a day off from being sick. I can't remember one anyway. And in all those years, I never really used the insurance program except for sports injuries, which I would get occasionally, a sprained ankle or a torn hamstring or whatever it might be. But I expected that. But other than that, when you talk about a healthy life, at Whirlpool, they would make us go and get a yearly annual physical. And it was interesting because when I would go down there at my age, I would stay on the treadmill for as many as 18, one time 20 minutes. And I asked the guy one time, I said, how long do people stay on the treadmill? does anybody stand more than 20 minutes? And he goes, yeah, professional soccer players. And when they would bring my results out, my blood work, all the doctors would come out of their offices to look at my work because it was so unusual. And everything in my blood test was right on where it was supposed to be. So I guess I've done the right things to this point to live a really healthy life and to be at my age to be able to compete with kids who are in their 20s in the sports that I do. So I've been pretty lucky, I think.
Well, I think it's more than luck. I think you've made some great decisions, and it has inspired me actually to try to personally to make some changes with my own diet. Someone who has grown up eating meat and loves hamburgers, that's been probably my largest challenge. But at the same time, Joe, you and I have known each other for about a year and a half, and I've been inspired by your success as a healthy individual and how you've helped build and shape healthy teams within your organization at Whirlpool and other organizations around the globe. So I've made some changes to my diet to try to lean more towards a plant-based diet. It has been a slow turn, but one nonetheless, and one that I have enjoyed based upon the variety of foods that I can eat and how I feel after I eat. I think the main concern that I had initially and that people seem to be asking me about is protein. By not eating meat, are you getting enough protein?
Well, and that's a pretty simple answer. And almost any website you go to today will tell you, and I'm talking about like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Association, all those, they all talk about protein. That if you eat a normal diet in America, you get enough protein. So that's really not a concern. The average woman should get like 46 grams a day. The average male should get about 56 grams a day. If you're getting that much protein and you are in just a normal diet, you're fine and you don't have to worry about it. When you think about America, and anybody that might be listening to this podcast, have you ever known anybody that's ever had a protein deficiency? It's unheard of. It's unheard of in America. And yet every single day, hundreds, if not thousands of people have heart attacks. And as a result of the typical American high-fat, high beef diet that they eat. And so, there's a lot of reasons that you should, reduce the amount of protein that you're getting anyway, because you get about 2 or 3 times what you need every day right now.
How do you get your protein? As a vegan, you said you've been vegan since you were in your 20s.
I have, and all foods are made up of carbohydrates, protein, and fats. All foods, doesn't matter what they are. And in a vegan diet, if you're eating beans and nuts and tofu and then all kinds of plants, I get almost double what I need every day. My blood tests show that I have twice the amount of protein in my blood that I need every day. So I'm getting more than I actually need. And most people get 3 times. So I get it in everything that I eat. If you eat a normal diet, you don't have to worry about protein. And all the research has said that to this date. And, I always kid people. Do you know what the largest mammal is on the planet?
An elephant?
An elephant. Mm-hmm. An elephant is a vegan. An elephant eats no
and
meat.
They're pretty strong. Yeah.
I always say, how do they build all that muscle? How is it possible that they build all that muscle? And then, the largest primate on the planet is a lowland gorilla. Yeah. And you know how powerful they are, right? All they eat is plants. How do they build all that muscle? How do they have that strength? Even an orangutan, Tim, they're 10 times the strength of a human, and they eat nothing but fruits.
Well, you just eliminated my next question: is by not eating meat or eating less protein, will that make one feel weak? It doesn't for elephants and orangutans, so I get our gorillas. But
exactly, or for bodybuilder. There's even a professional football player, Tony Hernandez. He was a wide receiver for the Atlanta team. I think you probably know
the Falcons. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. And he talks about his vegan diet and how it helped him and it made him a better athlete as well. And you look at a lot of the guys in the Tour de France that ride 200 miles a day for 17 straight days. I mean, it's like the most grueling of all sports. A lot of those guys are vegans too, because they recover faster through a diet like that versus a diet that's full of fat and animal-based foods.
So we can just put that myth to rest.
Please.
Please. Put it to rest.
I hear that so often. I'm just tired of hearing it.
You did it with the elephant thing. I'm sold. You had me at elephants.
There you go.
So, everyone I talk to seems to have an opinion about the idea of limiting their protein. If you can't, what spell out a healthy diet for me? What constitutes a healthy diet?
The government puts out the so-called balanced meal thing, but it's the trouble with the balanced meal thing that the government puts out is that it's built around lobbying. And so the initial food groups, there were 16 food groups in America. And the lobbies got it down to 4. And of the 4, milk and meat were 2 of them. And half of it was milk and meat. Now, fast forward to today when we have the food pyramid and now we have the food plate. It shows you how much you should eat. If you look at the food pyramid, the very top of it has a little bit of meat in it and a little bit of milk in it. And we finally gotten to a place where if you read and follow the food pyramid, that's probably a healthy diet where you're getting grains and you're getting carbohydrates, you're getting fruits and vegetables, you're getting nuts and so on. That's what makes up and constitutes a healthy diet. The idea that a McDonald's hamburger, fries, and a Coke are good for you is just ridiculous. And the reason why today America is suffering with tremendous amounts of obesity and people being overweight, upwards of 60% of Americans, it just shows that the diet that we're eating in this country really is wrong for human beings.
So what about, I've heard about the 9 essential amino acids that vegans or vegetarians can get from plant foods. So we don't need meat for that, right? So they're essential, and all 9 of them are in plant foods.
Yeah, this was one of the great reveals, I think, in terms of research they found is that, in meat, if you eat meat, they have the so-called 9 essential amino acids, lysine, tryptophan, so on. There's 9 of them that you're supposed to get. And people always said about vegetarians that they couldn't get them in plant foods because they don't exist, they would say, in plant foods. What we found was that they actually do exist in plant foods. As a matter of fact, they exist in different plant foods, and different ones exist in different plant foods. So you can eat a variety of plants that combine all those the amino acids, and you get them in your system, and your system actually combines them for you. You don't have to eat them as a whole plant protein, for example, that you get in meat. But there are foods that do contain full amino acids, like quinoa, for example,
quinoa, sure.
Beans and beans and nuts provide the complement to anything that you get in plants. So the idea that for some reason vegetarians are deficient in protein or amino acids in protein, that's not true, and has been proven to be true now. I think that myth has been dropped about 25, 30 years ago.
So do we have to find that perfect combination?
No.
You can eat them throughout the day. You don't have to eat them all at once to make sure that you get these 9 essential amino acids and various plants that have various components or various amino acids. Just throughout the day, include those in your diet.
The body takes the amino acids that are in all different types of foods, combines them, and you have your whole protein.
So in terms of how much protein we should have throughout the day, does that vary if somebody is a bodybuilder or if somebody's an athlete or if somebody just wants to maintain a healthy diet? What is that range of how many grams of protein we need per day?
Well, the recommended amount, I think I said this earlier, the recommended amount for protein is 46 grams for women and 56 grams for men. Most of the research says that's really all you need. Any excess is sent out of your body. And what happens with too much protein is it combines with calcium and reduces the bone mass in humans. As a matter of fact, if you look at, I know you're looking at me with a curiosity, but if you look at studies where people have the highest levels of where they consume the highest levels of calcium, but also protein, they have the highest levels of osteoporosis in the world. And in areas where they're vegetarian and they don't consume as much protein, they actually have stronger bones. So from population studies, we can see around the world where people that eat less protein have better bone density than in areas where people consume tons and tons of protein and have lower bone, like America. I mean, look at this country, the number of people, especially women, who have brittle bone disease. Well, why would that be? If you're getting so much calcium from the use of milk and get so much protein in meat, well, that combines to make your bones brittle. But to go back to your original question, though, is what do you need? We say 56 grams. If you get 56 grams, you're taking care of your body's needs. They say that if you're a really
Who is they? They say
research. So the research that I've read over the years, this kind of information is all available online today. This is general knowledge today in terms of research and what they've done. But if you look at the studies, anything over 56, you pretty much eliminate from your body. But if you're an endurance athlete, they say maybe up to 100. That's in dispute, but you might say, well, in order to be protected, I'm going to need 100 grams. Most people get 100 grams in their diet anyway because of how they're eating today. If you switch to a diet like mine, I get twice what I need, so I'm at 100 grams.
So there's really, not to upset the protein shake industry,
but, exactly.
But I mean, it's really not necessary, I guess, to drink the heavy protein shakes. It's marketed to us. as a tool to use after we do a workout so that we can rebuild that muscle quicker.
Exactly.
But it's inaccurate is what you're saying?
That's inaccurate, yeah. The body will use the available protein, the 56 grams or the 70 or 80 or 100 grams that people get every day. Body, it's funny at gyms, trainers, I had a guy come up after a presentation I was making on healthy teams one time, and he asked me about protein. And he said that the trainer at my gym recommended that he get 180, almost 190 grams of protein. And he asked me if there was a problem with that. And I said, well, yeah, for one thing, I said, it can wash your bones out. That's certainly a problem, but you don't need that much. You should be eating other foods that are healthy for you. And he was kind of shocked by that he had been consuming this much protein every day. As a matter of fact, he said it was kind of difficult to get because he took it in pills and in powder form and all that, those special drinks that they serve at the gyms and stuff. Most of that's unnecessary. And if people backed off of it, they wouldn't find that they lose all their muscle mass or they wouldn't become skinny. I mean, you can
be a good experiment.
Yeah. Well, you can try it and see. But again, like I said, how do elephants build all that muscle? How do orangutans, become so much stronger than humans? I have not had meat in almost 40 years. And I've done sports at very high levels over the course of my career.
And tell people, I know what it is, but tell people what the levels at which you've performed. You were a Division I baseball player?
I was a Division I baseball player. I played tennis at a professional level at one point in my career, and I played racquetball at a professional level in my career. So during the course of all that time, I've done a lot of sports and never needed the protein to make me stronger or healthier or whatever. I mean, I've done it without that. So
and just maintaining a healthy balance.
That's right.
So what about, we've talked about the impact of too much protein. How about lean protein?
This is a great one. And this is another one I hear. I hear people recommending that you should eat lean protein. And by that, they mean, for example, lean beef.
Right. That's how I perceive that.
Right. Let me tell you the myth there. There's no such thing as lean protein. Protein is protein. It comes in packages, right?
Yeah.
Like beef is a package. And they say lean protein would be, for example, instead of having chopped beef, maybe you would have a lean piece of beef, like maybe some kind of a steak that's lower in fat.
Well, sure. Like you see ground beef, there's the ground chuck, and then there's ground beef, and there's various levels of percentage of fat.
Exactly. So meat will have somewhere between 70 to 75% fat on down to maybe 40%, depending on what you're buying. So they describe lean protein, for example, as a package that has 70% of it in fat, and then you have protein in the beef. Well, that's not lean protein. That's fat protein in my mind. If you're thinking about what you're eating, lean protein in my mind would be beans,
yeah.
tofu, nuts. Now, nuts have a lot of fat in them, but it's unsaturated fat, so it's actually good for you. If you want to get protein in your body and you don't want to get sick from having heart disease or blocked arteries or whatever, eat real lean protein, which comes from a plant-based diet rather than a meat-based diet.
Well, you mentioned tofu a moment ago, and that's something that I've added to my diet. And really, you say tofu, and immediately, at least most of the people in my sphere of influence, they give me this weird look. Like, are you kidding me? You're eating tofu? Really, it doesn't taste bad at all, especially if you little seasoning in there and you mix it with your beans or your quinoa or your kale or some long grain. It's fantastic. But there are a lot of people that I guess there's some social stigma associated with tofu for whatever reason. The second one is that it's dangerous for you. Now that's a whole other podcast. I think we should do a whole topic on that because you and I've done a lot of research on tofu. But if you can just scratch the surface of tofu and what your thoughts are.
Let me just answer that because I've gone through this my whole life about the thing about, you eat tofu.
I know.
Well, think about this. Some people eat liver.
I know.
Is that amazing?
And that's the most disgusting smell and taste. But it's I know.
Yeah.
We had this conversation yesterday when we went out to dinner with my family, regarding liver and that putrid smell, which some I sure like it because they still sell it and eat it. But yeah, that's
some people eat chicken embryos, or they're called eggs, but they're chicken embryos, right? That's what they eat. And for some reason, to eat something that's a bean, right, made up into this white stuff that people find so offensive. People don't mind eating shoulders of cows and eating tongues of pigs or whatever it might be. Some people even eat brains and some people eat intestines. Why such a stigma on tofu? All it is a plant. Yeah. And and this is what I tell people when they give me a hard time about it. If you and I were starving, let's say, and we were in the house and there was this piece of beef that had been on the counter for say 3 days. and it had maggots in it, and it was rotten. And next to that was this nice apple. Which would you jump on and eat right away? See, people don't stop on the side of the street and eat that dead crow that's fallen on the ground, because that's not what we crave. We're not made up like that. So when people say, "Oh, how do you eat tofu?" I always think, how do you eat a dead cow? How do you eat a pig that's been butchered? How do you eat chicken embryos? So just answer that question. And I'm sorry, now I forgot what the other question
was. No, but I think we could stop right there. I'm going to add that to my list of responses, because it's funny. I do get weird looks from, I would say, 90% of the people that I bump into with the fact that I've incorporated tofu into my diet, and I'm an instant target. But now we'll start bringing up the shoulders and intestines and all
That's right. The chicken embryos.
Chicken embryos, right. Yeah. All right, so what about carbs? Let's switch over to carbs, because I know there needs to be a nice balance of carbs and protein, correct?
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about carbs today is carbs is a bad word. I hear people talking sometimes. I was at an airport one time.
Cutting carbs, yeah.
This guy said, we cannot eat any carbs. Well, carbohydrates are, just for example, fruits and vegetables and beans. Those are carbohydrates, and those are things that the body needs to be healthy. If you're not eating those foods, you're going to be sick. And if you're eating, bacon and cheese and hamburgers and drinking milkshakes, you have a problem. And that's why America's so obese. There are healthy carbs and there are unhealthy carbs. And unhealthy carbs are processed foods. Anything that's processed pretty much is bad for you. So
give us a list. I mean,
chips and white bread and white rice and white flour and almost anything that comes in a package that's not, animal-based is a simple carbohydrate. Simple meaning anything that had fiber in it has been taken out of it. And when you're eating simple carbs, you're going to gain weight because it raises your blood sugar, it raises blood glucose, and blood glucose gets stored in your fat cells, and you get fat. And that's the mechanism that works there. But the idea that the idea that you would ever give up complex carbohydrates, which are fruits and vegetables and beans and grains, that's the worst possible idea. Every bit of research for the last 40 years, and I've read it all, says this: eat more fruits and vegetables in your diet, and I know you've heard this, and eat less meat. And if you're doing that, you're really on your way to a much better health. And Tim, I've spoken to audiences, and I've run this organization. I've seen hundreds of people that have made changes in their diet and eliminated things like high blood pressure, even angina, pain in their heart, things like that. I've watched people go from being 100 pounds overweight to being normal weight in 6 months by a change of diet alone. I know how powerful this is because I've seen it, not only in my own life, in my family's life, in the life of my brothers and sisters and everybody around me, but also in employees and people that have watched me speak and come up afterwards a year or two later and said, "Hey, I watched what you said last year and followed it, and I lost 50 pounds, or I'm feeling better than I've ever felt."
So in addition to people benefiting on a personal level, I mean, Joe, with what you do, as you're on the speaker circuit, you teach companies how to build healthy teams, which in turn will save them tons of money with healthcare costs.
Yeah, I mean, think of me as an example. I spent probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on health insurance over the years I had Whirlpool. If I had self-insured, I'd have had all that money today because I never used it. The biggest cost for a corporation, typically bigger than their bottom line, is their healthcare costs. And they'll all tell you that today. And a lot of really big organizations, just like Whirlpool, are working on ways to bring health into their organization and motivate their people to get healthy and lose weight. The trouble is they just don't do a very good job of it.
So let's go back to the meat topic again. We're talking about protein, and we've talked about beef, right?
Yeah.
But what about the other forms of meat, like chicken and fish, which is supposed to be very healthy for us, right? Because we're taught from the time we're very young that both of those sources of protein are healthy for us.
Yeah, and I suppose in America, chicken and fish are health foods. I mean, the reality would say that. To me, it's a little like smoking a full-level cigarette and then going to the low-tar cigarettes and saying, "Oh, I'm doing a really good job here. I'm smoking low-tar cigarettes." Now, I don't want to bash all the people that are eating chicken and fish, but let me just say a couple things. That chicken is like meat. It's raised with high levels of antibiotics, tetracycline. It's raised with growth hormones. Quite often in very conservative magazines like Consumer Reports, they talk about the level of bacteria that are on chickens, and they warn you that if you eat chicken, to make sure you rub down your countertops and your refrigerators and your anything in your kitchen, because if you touch something on that chicken and you touch your mouth, you can get salmonella or E. coli. And 18,000 people in America die as a result of food poisoning, and much of that comes from chicken.
Wow.
That's the first thing I'd say about it. Now, I'll also say that chicken has about the same level of cholesterol that meat does, so you're not getting a win there. You do have a little bit less saturated fat in chicken than you do in beef, so that's where the only win comes in. But every other negative part of that, it goes in your diet. Fish is associated with a lot of healthy things, but there are two kinds of fish that you can eat. A lot of the fish you get today is farmed fish, which has the same issues. Antibiotics that go in the water to keep these fish healthy. And then fish typically has high levels of bacteria. Again, Consumer Reports did a great study on that, where they talked about once you get the fish in your house, it has billions of counts of bacteria on it because it goes through a long process of getting there. It's not like catching a fish in the ocean and frying it 5 minutes later.
Right.
That's what you should really be doing with fish. But eating fish is associated with a number of different things, like lowering levels of heart disease, lowering levels of blood pressure with some of the various things that are in meat. It does have a lower level of fat in it than meat does, but it also has the same level of cholesterol. So it's give or take. I don't tell people not to eat fish, but just make sure you know where it's coming from. And probably 2 or 3 times a week should be your max amount when you're eating fish.
All right, Joe. So again, for those that have maybe stumbled upon this podcast, and this is the only episode that you've listened to so far, because perhaps maybe you're in a weight loss program or you're looking to learn more about protein, we encourage you to go back and listen to the Building Healthy Teams episode that we have here in the Quest for Quality podcast. And again, Joe is not a doctor, but he is 66 years old and in perfect health, and he's changed many, many lives over the decades that you've been speaking, and that must be where you get your greatest satisfaction.
Well, you do. I think in all the work that I've done, I think having people come up to me and say, "Hey, I remember when this one kid had lost 100 pounds as a result of a conversation at dinner he had with me." Other people that have dropped their blood pressure, that have felt better, they're able to do sports again, things like that. It's the most satisfying thing that you do in terms of getting people to realize what health is about. And I'll just say this too: I'm not a doctor, but I don't talk like a doctor either, and I can relate to people and what they're going through as a result of the work I've done over these many years.
So, Joe, give us an example of some of the organizations that you've addressed in the past and what they've done at these various conventions because of the topic on building healthy teams that you're presenting to their audience.
Well, the presentation that I do is really about chronic diseases. It's about the level of death and destruction that goes on in America as a result of high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, and stroke and heart disease. Those are the chronic diseases that are killing 2 million people every year in America. And what I do at the conventions is I talk about them. I let people understand what these diseases are, why they're so dangerous for you, and the impact it has on your health. The trouble with going to a doctor, and again, this gets into whether or not, doctors are the best ones to talk about this. So if you go to a doctor, for example, and they tell you that you have high blood sugar, they don't spend the time after you've been diagnosed telling you why that's so dangerous, why diabetes is a disease that you really need to worry about. That's what I do. In this presentation at conventions, I talk about why these diseases are so dangerous and what you should do, what you can do to protect yourself from them over the longer term. And that's really the basis of my presentation.
All right. So if you'd like to have Joe come on out to your upcoming event or convention to speak about how to build healthy teams and learn more about these horrible diseases and how to prevent them within your team or just within yourself, make sure you visit Joe's website at www.qforqwithjoe.com. That's www.Q4withjoe.com. There's a Request Joe button right at the top of his website. You can click on that, fill out the form, and somebody will get back to you right away, and we'll let you know of Joe's availability. You can put him on a plane, come on out. He's a delightful person, as you could tell from the podcast, and he travels all over the country, so we encourage you to do that. Also encourage you to subscribe to this podcast as well, too. It's very simple. Just go to the homepage at whatever form you're listening to this podcast through, possibly iTunes. Hit subscribe. That way you're sure not to miss a single episode. In addition to teaching you and your organization how to build a healthy team, Joe will also teach you about customer service and building high-performance cultures and leadership, the economy and the direction the American economy is headed over the next 10 years, a myriad of topics Joe will cover in his Quest for Quality. Thanks again for joining us. We'll catch you for another edition on the Quest for Quality podcast with Joe.